first of all, we always dedicate our learning, to the freeing of hostages, and
Yeah.
as well as to the welfare of the Israeli soldiers, who are always on our mind. I also wanted to say, whatever it is, about Rabbanit Devorah. She is one of the people. I don't like using the terminology. You know, he's a Talmid Chacham. But she is a Talmida Chachama. Is that the right word?
So it's interesting because Talmid Chacham actually means student of a Chacham. So
Right.
depending on what era you are, this is what I like to say. I'm a Talmidat Chachamim. I'm a student of male teachers, but the next generation are Talmidot Chachamot as
Ah.
well. So
Oh, yeah, yeah. When sometimes, I think erroneously, Rav Avi refers to me as a Talmud Chacham. I said, well, it's true. He says I'm a Talmud of many Chachamim. You know, so
exactly.
So I said, but anyway, and then we went, take it away, Ravanat
Okay,
Devorah.
so let me just check if this is the best way to share the screen is the best way to do this. Do you want me to, I could also put a copy in the Google. Tell me what's best.
Okay, we generally just do it online, the way you have it now.
Oh,
Screen share.
okay, great. Okay. So I just am gonna set it up so that you know what? I have a paper. So, okay, you can all see the screen, correct? You all have access?
I do.
Yeah, but the print is small. Can you make it bigger?
Absolutely. Okay, let me just
Thank
go
you.
back to that. Where is, shoot. Okay, now I have to figure out how to get back to that. Okay, I'm gonna stop and start again, and I'm gonna make it bigger because I am in the same boat. Okay, let me just make it bigger on my screen. Oh, come on. Make it 150, and I'll bring it this way. Okay, better?
Can't see anything.
Oh, because I didn't share it. Okay, hold on. It's been a while, as you can see. Okay, now here we go. Now I'm going to share it.
Yep,
Yes?
there it is.
Okay,
Okay,
awesome.
thank you.
Okay, so fine. I just wanted to be able to see all your faces. Um, okay, so, ugh, okay, I have to go back to screen sharing. I don't know what I'm doing here. Okay. Because I have to move it. Why am I? Okay, I'm sorry. Oh, here it is. Okay. Okay. I don't know why I can't see it.
You can't see it?
I
I
can't
can.
see it. I know you can see it, but I did
We can see
something.
it for
Oh,
sure.
here. I know, but I did something and I want to be able
Yeah.
to tap it.
Yeah, but you
Look
have to be
down.
able to see it if you're going to be reading from it.
Exactly. I mean, I have another one, but I need to be able to toggle for you guys.
Hmm.
Okay. I'm going to do this one more time and then I'm not going to mess with it. Okay. Okay. We good? Yeah.
I've got it.
Okay. Excellent. Okay.
How
So
about you, Lance? Can you see it?
is it big enough?
Yes.
Okay. Great.
Okay. Please
All
Take it
continue.
right,
away.
here we go. Okay, so first of all, hello everyone, and Bert, thank you so much for inviting me to speak to everyone. I really feel very honored. So this is one of my favorite shiurim, and the reason why it's one of my favorite shiurim is it talks about the fact that we actually have the ability and have created mitzvot. So it's obviously mitzvot fall in. Generally, we think of mitzvot as being commanded by God, but we also know that we have rabbinic mitzvot, such as the reading of the Megillah, lighting of Hanukkah candles, washing our hands before eating bread. Certainly, the Megillah and lighting Hanukkah candles have to have been made by the rabbis because they happen after the Torah. So what is really interesting about these rabbinic mitzvot is that we treat them in many ways as if they were from God. And the way we do that primarily is we say Asher Kiddishanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu, that God sanctified us with God's commandments and commanded us to do the following. So that we're saying that this mitzvah that the rabbis created is in fact commanded by God. How does that work? So the Gemara in Shabbat tells us that there are two sources for this. One of the sources is the verse that tells us that we have to listen to the court, which becomes the rabbis. And since there's a biblical commandment to listen to the court or to listen to the rabbis, when the rabbis command us to do something, sort of by transitive property, God is commanding us to do it. The second thing, then, in addition, the Gemara brings down, the Talmud brings down a verse from the Parsha of Hazino, the second to last of the Torah readings of the year, which says, "Remember the days of old." So, so that again is sort of invoking the fact that what we do now, while in certain ways it's novel, it has a whole history taking us back to the Torah. And the example that the Gemara uses is the mitzvah of lighting Hanukkah candles, where when we light Hanukkah candles, before we light Hanukkah candles, we say, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech olam, asher kiddishanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lahadlik ner shel Chanukah. Okay, so that God commanded us again to light the lights of Hanukkah, which of course God didn't command us to do. But today we're going to take a look at Shabbos candles. Nowhere in the Talmud does it ever say that one makes a bracha when lighting the Shabbos candles. And we're going to look at the two places in the Talmud in which Shabbos candles are discussed. And our question for today is it a mitzvah to light Shabbos candles? Or is it an ancient practice? And we'll talk a little bit about what that ancient practice might be. I'm going to try and stretch you guys out so I can see all of you. Okay, that works much better. Okay, hold on, because I have a piece of paper so I can, okay. How many of you? There are 8 of you, correct?
Looks like it.
Okay, awesome. So I have everybody now on the screen so I can see you. All right. My question just to start with is, do you think lighting Shabbos candles is a mitzvah? And if so, what makes you think so?
Judy, you must have go ahead, Judy, go.
Yes, hi, Judy.
You got to unmute.
You're muted. You're muted.
This is especially close to my heart, because in the beginning of June, our granddaughter will be a Mir Hashem Bat Mitzvah, and she is studying just this for her.
Oh, wonderful.
So I have vested interest. But why do I think it's a mitzvah?
No.
Because every Shabbos when I'm lighting candles, I do make that bracha. Asher Kiddishanu. So it's like by definition
Awesome.
that Hashem commanded us to do so.
Great.
Pashut.
Pashut, right? That's as simple as it gets. We make a bracha. Okay. The other thing that, okay, so I'm going to start back and I'm going to suggest that that's something that developed, which is kind of a pretty radical idea. And I want to start way back in the period of the Mishnah and make a different argument, and let's see where we go. Actually, I did not give you the Mishnah, so let's talk it through. So it's true that if you go to HIR Friday night, between Kabbalat Shabbat and Mariv, there's a kavanah. But in many many, many shuls that daven Nusach Ashkenaz, as we do, the Kabbalat Shabbat and Mariv is separated by the recitation of the second chapter of the Mishnah of Shabbat, which is called Bameh, which starts with the words Bameh Madlikin Uvameh Ein Madlikin. What may we use to kindle the Shabbos lights, and what may we not use? And the chapter goes through a pretty detailed list of various fuel sources that you may or may not use to light your lights, what types of wicks you may use, and then it discusses some other things in the end, but that is the majority of the chapter. So the issue is, what is this all about? Okay. And what it's about is, let's think about back in ancient times, why would you be lighting lamps? So you lit lamps every single night, right? You always lit lamps because there were no street lights, there was no electricity. So in order to be able to see, you needed to light something. You needed to light some sort of lamp. And people use probably all sorts of different fuels in order to light their lamps. But when it comes to Friday night, we have a particular concern, and that's why we have this whole chapter about what fuel sources are good, what fuel sources are not good, what wicks are good, what wicks are not good. What's our particular concern?
Kavod for Shabbos.
Okay,
In other
so
words,
you're
if you're gonna
one
have
step ahead of me because let's assume you can have that happen with any, that's about having light. But why would we say this fuel source is good and this fuel source isn't good? Or particularly this wick is good, this wick isn't good? We have a particular concern here. And the concern is, if you extinguish a light on Shabbat, you have now violated the Shabbat. So the concern is, since you have lights all the time, maybe it's not burning well, and you'll come to try to fix the wick, you'll come to try to adjust it, and you might end up extinguishing it, relighting it, doing something like that. And because it's Shabbat, and this is forbidden, and because this is something you do every single day of the week, we want to make sure that you use a fuel source and a wick that catches well, so that you won't be tempted to touch the lantern at all. You won't be tempted to attempt to fix it and thereby extinguish it. That is the concern, the major concern of the chapter. That has nothing to do with the only relationship to Shabbat is a concern of doing malacha, is a concern of violating Shabbat by doing one of the 39 things that you're not permitted to do. And there's only, there really is no real indication that that there's any particular ritual involved with this particular act, except for one rather infamous Mishnah that comes towards the end. It's the next to last Mishnah. And it says, Al shalosh averot nashim meitot b'shat leidatam. For three sins, 3 transgressions, women die in childbirth. Al sheinan zihirim b'nida b'chala uv'hadlakat nerot. Because they are not sufficiently meticulous in the laws of Nida, the laws related to immersion in the mikvah, separating challah and lighting the lights. Okay, lovely. Okay, just so you know, Friday night I would go to shul with my dad, and the only females in the shul were me and my friend, and I was completely freaked out by this Mishnah, because not only did I find it upsetting, but I'm the oldest of 8 children, so my mother was kind of constantly having children, so then I had to worry about whether she was doing all of this properly. But you know, the best way that I can kind of explain this is to make 2 points. One is, within the theology of Chazal, within the theology of the rabbis, they did assume something that we find extremely objectionable, but they did assume that people died because they did things wrong, right? They did not have the same notion that we have, that horrible things happen in the world. It's no one's fault. There's no such thing as terrible things happening because you're being punished. Unfortunately, many good people die. But this was, at least in some places, an expression of their theology. The second thing I would sort of add to that is obviously women died in childbirth a lot. So it's their attempt to try to explain what may be going on. So they took these three things. Well, one is definitely about women because it's about the female body. That's Nida. And the other two are domestic. So probably it was women who were doing this. That is the only indication in this chapter that there's some sort of ritual connected to lighting the candles. Why? What? Yes, go ahead, Judy.
Why in Bamed Malikin does it not specify that that extinguishing the lights is forbidden?
It does. It doesn't say the particular mitzvah, or the particular violation, but it does assume it, right? It assumes you know it. It talks about that, and that's pretty standard for the Mishnah. We actually do have the list of the 39 melachot in the Mishnayot of Shabbat, but strangely, they don't come in until the 7th chapter, which is also fairly bizarre. Okay, so let's move on. So that's really the only indication in the Mishnah, and that indication is really by association, right? The fact that separating challah is a mitzvah, and the fact that a woman immersing post-menstruation is a mitzvah. Those are mitzvot from the Torah, is the only sort of the fact that this is one of those three may be an indication that there's some sort of mitzvah character here. But other than that, we really don't have that. And our goal is to see where this is coming from. So I want to start us off. With source number one, which is the Gemara in a short. We're going to have two short excerpts from various Gemarot, just to let you know the major discussion in this part of the Gemara in general. This is the chapter in the Talmud in which we talk about Hanukkah. Okay, Hanukkah gets a few pages here. Makes sense that it's here. Okay, so now we're going to start getting to the kinds of things that Bert referred to. So I'm going to read it in the Hebrew along with the English translation. Source number one. Amar Rava. So Rava said, Pshitali, it's obvious to me. Ner beito v'ner Chanukah, ner beito adif, mishum shlom beito. This is referring to someone who's poor, has very little money, and they're going to have to make a choice as to what they're going to prioritize. So question number one is, if I only have enough money to buy lights for my home or the Hanukkah lights, what should I buy? So the Talmud says the lights of the home are preferred because, I should actually read it, on account of the piece of the home. Ner beito v'kiddush hayom. What if I only have enough money to buy lights for the house or wine for kiddush? Ner beito adif. Once again, the lights of the house are preferable. Same reason, mishum shlom beito, on account of a piece in the home. Okay, so I'm gonna stop here for a moment and ask us to think about this. There's something very surprising about these two statements. I think they're not the answer you would expect to hear. Anyone have any thoughts on why I just said that without reading my mind? But is there something peculiar about this? We have the lights of the home, which means these lights that we're going to light Friday for Shabbat, versus the menorah, and versus wine for kiddush. So what we do know about the Hanukkah candles is they're a mitzvah. They're a rabbinic mitzvah. And what we do know about wine for Kiddush, well, Kiddush is actually a mitzvah doraita, a biblical mitzvah. Question about the saying it over wine is a rabbinic mitzvah. But what we have a contrast with is a mitzvah versus the lights of the home. And we're prioritizing the lights of the home. We're also being given a reason. It's not a mitzvah reason. It's peace in the home, shalom bayis. So what's that about? So let's take a look at source number, let me scroll down here.
Can you move it over a little bit? We're missing the first, we can't see, at least I can't see the first, if you, oh, there we go, better, thank you.
What did I do? I don't know what I
Yeah,
did.
it's fine. Yeah, it's
Okay.
perfect now.
Okay, but I need to go down and your guys' picture is in the way. So let me see if I can move it. I'm gonna move it for a second. Nope, I did it again. Ay, Ribbon Shalom. Okay, you can see it and I can't. Okay, all right. Okay. Okay, so I'm gonna move it. Okay, I did it again. All right. I'm gonna do it again. All right, I need to be able to toggle it, but you guys are a little bit in the way here. Okay.
So why don't you,
I'm trying to, and I'm trying to move you, but it's not working so well for me. Okay, all right. I don't know why. I'm really sorry. I'm not sure why I've become so not expert at this. Here we go. Okay, excellent. Okay. Here we go. Okay. Where's Rashi? Okay. Okay, so Rashi. So if you take a look at the first of the two Rashis, Rashi says, Shalom Beito. Vahachi amrinan lekaman, as we say below, vatiznach mi shalom nafshi, my life was bereft of peace. Zo hadlakat ner b'Shabbat. This refers to the kindling of the Shabbat lights, shebnei beito mitztarin leshev b'choshech, so that the family members do not suffer by sitting in the dark. Okay, so according to Rashi, what is Shalom Bayit? Why are we concerned? Why is it so important that we light the Shabbat candles? So the reason is because you have to imagine again, they don't have any other lights. So if it's pitch dark, right? If it's pitch black, people are going to trip. People are going to fall over each other. And that is definitely not going to be pleasant. And we need to have a pleasant environment on Shabbat. So even though one could argue that lighting these candles is not actually a mitzvah, it's a necessity in order to have a proper Shabbat. Now, Bert suggested before that in fact ties us to a mitzvah. Bert suggested that this was kavod Shabbat, honoring Shabbat. And kavod Shabbat is a rabbinic commandment. We get it from the pasuk in Yeshayahu. Anything that comes from the prophets is not considered a biblical commandment per se, but it's the fact that there's a pasuk that we're using gives it significance. It's a rabbinic mitzvah. One should both honor Shabbat, kavod Shabbat, and one should have oneg Shabbat. One should have pleasure on Shabbat. So in order to fulfill those ideas, right, we need to make sure that the home is light, people aren't tripping over each other. And another thing that Rashi says as Rashi says later on, if you take a look at the third paragraph here under Rashi, it says, it is the rabbinic commandment of kavod Shabbat, right? For it's not considered a festive meal unless you're eating in a well-lit location. So this connects to our Shabbat meal, right? And our Shabbat meal is one of the things that we do to have enjoyment on Shabbat. And we eat in a well-lit location because if you can't see what you eat, it doesn't taste the same. You want to use as many senses as possible if you can. Yeah, Bert.
And and it is actually a mitzvah to Rabbanon to have 2 meals at least, or 3 meals, right? So that
Mhm,
in fact,
mhm.
it helps you in the fulfillment of a mitzvah.
Correct. That is absolutely correct. Okay, so let's go on. Let's continue. So I wanted to move on to, I'm gonna read this, going back to the first source. This is the second piece of the Gemara that relates to candles on Shabbat. And again, what we're looking for is to see if we have any indications that this is some sort of mitzvah. So here we have Amar Rav Huna. Now it's Rav Huna who speaks. Haragil bener havian lo banim talmidei chachamim. One who habitually practices the lighting of the lamps will possess scholarly children. Hazahir b'mzuzah zocheh l'dira na'a. Someone who's meticulous in mezuzah will have a beautiful home. Hazahir b'tzitzit zocheh l'talit na'a. If you are meticulous in tzitzit, then you'll merit a beautiful garment. Hazahir b'kiddush hayom zocheh l'mimale garvei yayin. Someone who is meticulous in kiddush, right, having wine for kiddush, will be privileged to fill barrels of wine. Okay, so what's going on here? Why is this relevant to our discussion? Okay, so if you take a look, so again, I'm arguing here that there's an association. What do we know about mezuzah and tzitzit? We know that these are mitzvot, right? These are mitzvot of the Torah, and there's a correspondence between fulfilling the mitzvah and a reward, right? If you put mezuzot on your doorposts, you'll get a beautiful home. If you make sure when you wear a four-cornered garment, it has tzitzit on it, you'll get beautiful clothing. As you can see, it's the same kind of idea. Do a mitzvah, good things happen. Also, doesn't necessarily work that way. So the fact that we say, if you're careful with your Shabbat lights, you will have children who are Talmidei Chachamim, who are scholarly. The fact that it's on this list also seems to indicate some sort of association. What's the association between candles and children who are Torah scholars? So again, Rashi points out in this, oh, here I am. I'm back in, I forgot to up you. So now we're in the right place. This is the second paragraph here. As it is written, for mitzvah is a lamp, Torah is a light. Kiner mitzvah v'Torah or. And look what Rashi says. Al yudei ner mitzvah, the Shabbat v'Chanukah, ba or de Torah. Through the lighting of the mitzvah lights of Shabbat and Chanukah comes the light of Torah. And here Rashi tells us that, in fact, it is a mitzvah, okay? So Rashi equates the lighting of the Shabbos candles with the lighting of the Hanukkah candles. We know the lighting of the Hanukkah candles is a rabbinic mitzvah. Shabbos candles becomes a mitzvah as well in the view of Rashi. And I think that also has to do with the fact of where it comes in this Gemara. Okay, we good? Okay, so I want to move on to the second Gemara. So I'm going to move up here. And then we're going to look at a very interesting dispute between two of the Tosafos. Okay, now this goes back to our original list in the Mishnah of fuels that you should not use. And we have a dispute here between Rabbi Yishmael, a very important figure, and you don't see it here, but Chachamim. the majority opinion, the sages. And the dispute is about using tar as fuel for your candles for Shabbat. Rabbi Ishmael says you shouldn't. And he says the reason is because of the honor of Shabbat. And the majority position, which is how we rule, the Chachamim are going to say it's totally fine. But the Gemara here is going to try and figure out what's wrong, right? Why does this affect the honoring of the Shabbat? And that's what the Gemara goes to. So, my Tama, what's the reason? Amarava, so Rava answered, Mitoch sherecho ra, gzera shema yenichena v'yetze. Rav answered, since it's malodorous, there's nothing quite like burning tar. It is feared that the occupant of the house will leave it and go out. So you're going to leave your house because you can't still stand the smell. Amar le Abaye, said Abaye to him, v'yetze, big deal. There's no problem with leaving your house on Shabbat. There's no prohibition. Amar le, so here, he, meaning Rava, replied, Sha'ani omer hadlakat ner b'Shabbat chova. The kindling of the lamp on the Shabbat or for the Shabbat is the translation I used is a duty. I prefer obligation. And he's going to prove it. The Amar of Nachman bar Zavda, Amri la Amar of Nachman bar Rava Amar Rav. Okay, so now we have two traditions as to who made this statement. Hadlakat ner b'Shabbat chova. The lighting of the lamp for Shabbat is an obligation. Rechitzat yadayim v'raglayim b'chamin arvit, washing your hands and feet, or in our world that would be showering in warm water, again before Shabbat. Rishut is voluntary or optional. Vani omer mitzvah, and I say it's a mitzvah.
Is there a difference between chova and mitzvah?
That's going to be the question. Okay.
Oh.
So let's take this one second at a time. So we are saying that lighting candles is a chovah, is an obligation. Hi, Felice, we're in source number 2. Lighting Shabbat candles is an obligation, as opposed to showering, where we get 2 possibilities. The first one is that it's optional. Okay, so what's the difference there? This is your kavod Shabbat. In order to honor the Shabbat, these are things I do before Shabbat in order to honor it. There's a list that the Rambam that Maimonides gives us, and he includes things like making beds, sweeping the floor, setting the table, and on a personal level, changing your clothes, showering, okay? Showering for Shabbat so that you're clean for Shabbat, especially for people who didn't shower very often. Showering before Shabbat, or in this case, washing face, hands, and feet, which is what they usually talked about. That was one of the ways you prepared in order to enter into Shabbat in a respectful manner. And we also have lighting the candles. So showering, optional, lighting the candles, obligatory. Okay, so when we say obligatory, what would we normally think that means? So Bert, when we say obligatory, what would you assume that means?
A mitzvah.
It's a mitzvah, right? It's a mitzvah. It's a mitzvah to light the Shabbos candles. Is it a mitzvah to take a shower?
No.
So Rishut is interesting, okay? Rishut might mean that you don't have to, but if you do, you fulfilled kavod Shabbat, right? You did fulfill a mitzvah, but certainly you don't have to. That's the difference. That's why it's not obligatory. But interestingly, the second statement was va'ani omer mitzvah. However, I say it's a mitzvah to shower. Well, now things are a little tricky, right? What does that mean, right? Does that mean what I just said, which is you don't have to do it, but if you do it, you have fulfilled the mitzvah, the rabbinic mitzvah of honoring the Shabbat? That sounds about right. But what does that tell us about chovah, right? Why didn't we use the word, why didn't we say that lighting the candles is a mitzvah? What did it mean to call it an obligation instead of using that word mitzvah? Comments? Yes, Felice.
Yeah, I would say because lighting the candles actually brings in Shabbos for you. So like if you light candles, let's say earlier in the summer, 7 o'clock instead of, let's say, 7:45, your Shabbos begins at 7 o'clock when you light the candles, once you say the bracha.
That is true, right? Your Shabbat comes in early. So how does that relate to the obligation?
That you're doing something that you're supposed to do, but you may do it at a different time. As long as you do it before, not later.
Okay.
I think it's important.
Okay, great. So let me just make a point based on what Felice said. So this is very interesting, which is that moment of when are you accepting Shabbat? What makes it Shabbat? So the practice for women generally, and I'm going to make a distinction between Ashkenazic and Sephardic in a moment. The practice for women is the moment when it becomes Shabbat is when they light the candles, which means that even if a man lights candles, and by the way, someone needs to make sure there are candles lit in the home. Doesn't have to be a woman, could be a woman or a man. If there is a woman in the home, traditionally women have been the ones who've taken that upon themselves. But when women light, that is the moment generally when they accept Shabbat, unless you make a condition and you say, I am not accepting the Shabbat until X time. When the traditional practice, or when else is Shabbat, does one accept Shabbat? When you say Mekadesh HaShabbat in Shmon Esrei of Ma'ariv, when you actually say the words in which you sanctify the Shabbat. Okay, that's the other possibility. Now, this is always interesting to anyone here Sephardic? I'm guessing by people's names that the answer is no. Okay, so here's an interesting fact. Ashkenazim, particularly Ashkenazi women, when we light Shabbat candles, we light first and make the bracha afterwards. And that is because when we make the bracha, we have accepted Shabbat upon ourselves. And once we've accepted Shabbat upon ourselves, we obviously cannot light candles because that is one of the prohibited 39 melachot. So we light the candles first. Sfardim say the bracha first and then they light. Now there are two things that are going on there. One is they're not accepting Shabbat with the bracha. They're accepting Shabbat when the candles are actually lit, which actually makes a lot of sense. And the second, and the reason why they do that is because the general rule is when we say a bracha on the performance of the mitzvah, most of the time the bracha precedes the action. So let's think about shofar, right? When the shofar is blown on Rosh Hashanah, first we say the bracha lishmoa kol shofar, to listen to the sound of the shofar, and then the shofar is blown. When we read the Megillah, first we make the bracha of Al Mikra Megillah, upon the recitation of the Megillah, and then we read the Megillah. So what the Sephardic practice is, and we do the same thing here. We make the bracha, and then we perform the act, right? We perform the mitzvah. Ashkenazim say, no, we're accepting Shabbat with the bracha, and therefore we have to do the bracha afterwards. We have no choice. And the reason for the covering your eyes is to kind of almost pretend that you haven't lit the candles yet, because you haven't seen them. Then you uncover your eyes, and voila, your candles have been lit after you made the bracha. I'll give you a parallel example, just because I can't help myself. The same is true, by the way, for mikvah. Ashkenazic women immerse first, and then they say the bracha. That is not the way it normally would go. Normally, you would say the bracha and then perform the mitzvah. This is a practice already from the Middle Ages that when it comes to Ashkenazi women, we dunk first. But in order to make it look like we're making the bracha first, you dunk again. Okay, so you're kind of
That's
dunking
right.
in the
Yeah,
middle.
yeah.
Okay, and Sephardic women make the bracha first, and then they immerse. Again, same thing. Third example, netilat yadayim, washing hands for bread. What do? We wash first,
Yeah,
then we make the bracha. But we dry our hands after we make the bracha. So it's the same sort of idea of we're not following in Ashkenazic practice in these cases for various reasons, we're not following the rule. So we do something to make it appear like that. Now, I happen to have a Sephardic student, and and one day I was in the kitchen when he was washing for bread, and he said to me, "What I'm doing is the halacha. Like, don't try and correct me." He made the bracha, and then he washed his hands. So I got the answer on that. I was curious about it, and I said, you guys are completely consistent. You always make the bracha first.
Nice.
So yeah, so that's really interesting. Okay, in any event, I forgot where I was, but in any event, we see Rashi mentioning this as a mitzvah, but again, we have had no mention of a bracha. I just want you to look for a moment. No, we're not going to look there. So here's what we're going to do. I want us to, this is what we're going to do. Source number 4, we've kind of talked about. And source number 5, which is a long Tosafot, I put it on the sheet, but we're going to actually read it in the context of the following conversation or exchange of letters between two of the Tosafos. Everything that's in that Tosafot is here. So let me tack back for a second. So the Tosafos were all Ashkenazim living in the Middle Ages between, is that a hand, Carol? No, okay. Between about the, let's say the 1200s and the 1400s. The most well-known of all the Tosafos is Rabbeinu Tam, one of Rashi's grandsons, okay? He was called Rabbeinu Tam because his name was Yaakov, and he was using, the Torah describes Yaakov as Ish Tam, right, exactly, a simple or, man who sat in the tents, right, as opposed to his brother who was always outside. Rabbeinu Yaakov used this term Tam as his title, as his, his writing name. And he's called Rabbeinu, our rabbi, because he's such a central figure. And he is one of Rashi's grandsons. He is going to have a serious debate with another one of the Tosafos who lived around the same period of time. I'm going to show you, I'm going to take us down to source number 7. Oh, geez. Okay, I'm going to do this by hand, and that will get us to the right place. So if you take a look just at the heading of what I wrote on top of source number 7, you see I wrote Rabbeinu Mishulam.
That's number 6.
What? That's
number 6.
Okay. I see. Okay, fine. Okay. Okay. So, so Rabbeinu Mishulam is also from France, and he lives at the same time as Rabbeinu Tam. We don't know when he died, but he's a contemporary, and the two of them are going to battle it out. And what they're going to battle is they're going to argue about whether there is a bracha on lighting Shabbos candles. And we're going to look at the proofs that both of them use. And we're also going to see, and it's always interesting to see this, but when these rabbis disagree, often they use very strong language, okay? Often they really go at each other, which I find to be a lot of fun. But I think it also shows that the stakes are very high for them. And therefore the battle kind of takes precedent over everything else. And they're not necessarily, let's put it this way. It's like when you send the email immediately and you don't save it overnight when you're angry and wait to the next morning. So they haven't waited to the next day to send the email, and therefore it comes with all the strong language. So let's begin with number 5, with number 45. Okay, everyone got that? Do I have that up there? I do. Okay. All right, and I you know what? I'm going to read these in English because I want to make sure we have enough time. That work for everyone? Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So this first, these are letters. Okay, these are letters that are collected in Sefer HaYashar. Yashar means straight or righteous. Also related to Yaakov, right? Yaakov, when Yaakov is referred to as Yeshurun sometimes. So this is a collection done by Rabbeinu Tam, and he has in here some letters, and this is an exchange of letters between the two of them. So regarding the bracha for Shabbat candles, I have heard that they have uprooted the bracha for Shabbos candles and desecrated the holy preciousness of the mitzvah. Okay, so the first thing he says is essentially, there's a guy, I'm not even going to mention his name, who says we don't make a bracha on Shabbos candles. And that is a desecration. He's desecrated something holy. Then he goes on and he says, many chovot, meaning many things that are called obligation, require a bracha. And what he's referring to is the fact that sometimes we are told, the Gemara says that something is a chovah, something is an obligation, and yet it's not considered to be a mitzvah. The example that's brought is washing mayim achronim, okay?
Oh,
So
yeah.
this was the practice of, if you've eaten a meal with bread, to wash your hands before you say Birkat Hamazon. A lot of people do not do this, but the Gemara calls it an obligation. And the reason that the Gemara says it's an obligation is if you think about the food that they ate, one of the preservative that they used was a very strong salt, and people didn't wash their hands so often, so they were afraid that someone would take their salty hands,
That's your eye.
put it in their eye. Yes, thank you, Felice. So, so the Gemara there says it's an obligation because of danger, and that's even more important than a mitzvah. So sometimes when we use the word obligation, it actually isn't a mitzvah, it isn't a commandment. So Rabbeinu Tam is acknowledging this, but he's saying, despite the fact that there are obligations that are not mitzvot, there are also obligations that are mitzvot. In fact, pretty much any mitzvah that you're required to do can be referred to as a chovah, or the term that we use in halacha very often is you are chayav, right? You're chayav to do this. You're required to do this. The second thing he has to respond to is the fact that the bracha does not appear in the Talmud, right? So is this an actual legitimate bracha since it does not appear in the Talmud? Unlike, for example, the bracha on lighting Hanukkah candles, which is straight out in the Gemara. So this is what he says. We find many brachot in the Siddur of Saja Gaon and in the halachot.
Can you move the thing up so we can read
What
it
thing?
with you? You know, the source sheet.
We see it. I see it.
Oh, you do? Okay, I
Here.
don't. Okay.
It's in That
There we
helpful?
go.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So even though they are not recorded in the Talmud. So the second point he's making is not all the brachot we say appear in the Talmud. Many of them appear in the Gaonim, which is the period following the Talmud. It goes about to 1000. And these are the rabbinic leaders in the rabbinic leaders of the communities, the community in Babylonia. These were extremely, central figures who kind of who carried on a lot of the work afterwards. And one of the things that they did is they composed brachot. So he says, guess what? They compose brachot that appear nowhere in the Talmud, and yet they're legitimate. And this bracha, he's saying, does appear in the Gaonic literature, and I went through the Gaonic literature, and indeed that is the case. How much more so this bracha, which is in the Agadic words and the drashot that we say on Shabbat. Okay, it appears in some of the more midrashic type works. Everyone who hears what he says will laugh at him, and anyone who uproots the bracha will be uprooted. Okay, so he ends off by insulting him and basically saying, this is a really bad idea, right? You have desecrated what's holy. You have uprooted a commandment if you do not make a bracha before lighting or upon lighting Shabbos candles. Let's see the response. Okay, so here comes our friend Rabbeinu Meshulam. And here's how he starts off. So he's starting off sort of humbling himself, okay? Because I guess he knows the person he's arguing with has a tremendous amount of status. So this is also kind of a way that often part of the language of when one rabbi writes to another, I, the despised and rejected, respond to my masters, Rabbeinu Shmuel and Rabbeinu Yaakov, on news. I didn't know how to, it's sort of, that hurts the stomach, right? Gives me a stomach ache, okay? So note he's calling them masters. He's acknowledging that they are more central figures than him. And that's why, and he's saying this is very much in my humble opinion. Okay, that's how he's starting off. And then bang, okay, he's going to go full force. Regarding not to make a bracha for Shabbat candles, he quotes another Tosafos, Rabbi Eliyahu, who I cannot find information about, also ruled this way. He ruled just like I do and practiced this lichatchila. He said, this is what you should do. You absolutely should not make a bracha. That's proof number one. I have another important person who says what I say. Number two, in many other places we see that it's not their practice to make a bracha, right? Lots of places they don't make a bracha. Maybe in your place, Rabbeinu Tam, but not in the places where I am. And here's what seems to be a good reason. The reasoning seems plausible because the lighting is not the completion of the mitzvah. It is only done in order to create light at night. Were there an oil lamp already burning, one is not obligated to extinguish it and relight it as we find with the Hanukkah candles. This is a great argument. He's saying there is no actual mitzvah to light Shabbos candles. What we need to have is we need to have candles lit. So let's say in the morning, I put in 24 hours worth of fuel in my lantern. And comes Friday evening and I take a look and lo and behold, there's no need for me to do anything because there's enough fuel to keep me through Friday night all the way to the next morning. Were it a mitzvah, I would need to extinguish the lamp and relight it for the purpose of Shabbat. This is what I need to do for Hanukkah candles. If I have candles already lit on the day of Hanukkah and the time of lighting Hanukkah candles comes, that is not good enough. I need to extinguish it and relight it for the purpose of Hanukkah lights. Proof, he says, not a mitzvah, okay? Not the completion of the mitzvah. and therefore a bracha is inappropriate. I want the result, not the act of lighting. Really good argument. Okay, so now we're going to see what the response is. Like I said, and you can imagine this is correspondence that probably took some time, but they are both in France, so it didn't take forever. Okay, so now we're up to number 48. Rabbeinu Tam is going to respond. And this is a rather long response. I'm going to okay. I have like 3 paragraphs. I want to make sure I get to the end, because that's really the fun stuff. So I'm gonna
Rabbanit Devorah,
yeah.
I don't want to rush you or anything. We I think most of us could stay somewhat longer, but if you think that it's worthwhile to continue this and you can do it next week, in other words, if you have like 15, 20 more minutes of material, then do you want to do that? I'm just
I don't
trying
have
to.
15, I don't have 15, 20 minutes. I mean, if I had another, 10 minutes, I'd be okay.
Okay, fine.
Maybe
Go
a
for it.
little under. Okay. All right. So that okay with everybody if we go about 5 minutes over? Okay, great. So Rabbeinu Tam responds, that which you wrote that Rabbi Eliyahu also ruled one should not make a bracha, and his reasoning seems plausible since it's not the completion of the mitzvah. That's what you said. This is incorrect. This is the completion of the mitzvah. Just as with Hanukkah candles is to publicize the miracle, similarly here it's to have harmony in the home. So he says, look, when we light, and this one could argue, but when we light Hanukkah candles, well, the purpose is to publicize the miracle. So there is a result that you want to get. Same thing here. You want harmony in the home. Totally equivalent. We make a bracha when we light the candles for the purpose of publicizing the miracle. So too, we should make a bracha when lighting the Shabbos candles for the purpose of Shalom Bayis. And then he says, and anyhow, the bracha is already written about. Do you not believe Rav Amram Gahon, from whom we learn all brachot and prayers? And now he lists brachot that for sure Rabbeinu Meshulam says, the bracha on the maftir. And most brachot that are neither in the Talmud or Masechet Sofrim, that we make a bracha over Shabbat candles. If Rav Amram Gaon says we make a bracha over Shabbat candles, we make a bracha over Shabbat candles. Be smart and be quiet, and they won't mock you, and the angels will not punish you. Okay? Again, little harsh. Okay, let me move us up to the next paragraph. Okay, now this is fun. Now he says, since women make the bracha quietly, you have forgotten the practice. I too never heard the bracha, and sometimes when I would light, I would forget, because it's not as common among men as among women. So now he refers to the fact that the practice of long standing is that for the most part, the people who are lighting Shabbos candles are women. And he's saying, we guys don't necessarily know, because either it's not said, in the loud voice, or you're not around. And occasionally I would have to light the Shabbos candles. Let's say his wife was away. I'm not sure when she died, if it was before him or not. And I would forget. I'd forget to say the bracha because it was not something I was used to doing. So the fact that you don't know that there's a bracha is simply because you weren't paying attention, and that's understandable. But that's the only thing that's going on. Like he's essentially saying to him, I bet your wife makes the bracha, unless you told her not to. Okay, another proof for the bracha. It says, it's written in Halachot Gedolot, a Gaonic work. When one lights both the Hanukkah candles and the Shabbat candles, one lights the Hanukkah candles first. We know this. For if one lights the Shabbat candles first, it becomes forbidden to light Shabbat. It becomes forbidden to light Hanukkah candles. I need to fix that. This implies that one recites a bracha. How does that imply one recites a bracha? For without a bracha, how would acceptance of Shabbat be known? Okay, so he's saying, clearly we're making a bracha when lighting Shabbos candles, because if you lit the Shabbos candles without a bracha, and then you immediately went and lit your Hanukkah candles, since no bracha over the Shabbat candles has been said, you haven't yet accepted the Shabbat. Remember, Rabbeinu Tam is Ashkenazic, so this is the practice in Ashkenaz where we say where we light before we make the bracha, because the bracha is the acceptance of Shabbat. And then he says, our custom is Torah, and our custom in Babylonia follows the sages of the land of Israel, who are the main authorities, and therefore one should rely on our Gaonim and the Savaraim. So essentially what he's saying here is, this is a late development. Maybe this is a late development. I acknowledge that. Maybe it's a more on the custom side. I acknowledge that as well, but it doesn't matter, right? Customs are extremely important, and therefore you're supposed to do it the proper way, which is with the bracha. And now we get to the final paragraph of what Rabbeinu Tam has to say on the matter. Okay, now he's responding to what, remember, Rabbeinu Meshulam had said that if the lamp had already been lit, you don't extinguish it and relight it. And that's a proof that it's not a mitzvah. So he says the following, and what you wrote, that if a lamp was already burning, one does not extinguish it and relight it, what of it? Meaning that's not significant for our question. In the case of covering blood, when you slaughter certain animals like deer and fowl, if the blood was covered by the wind, one is exempt from covering it. But if it becomes uncovered again, one is obligated. Here's the deal, right? When you slaughter, not cows, but when the shochet slaughters, for example, chickens, he's required to cover the blood. And there's a bracha that's made. So what's the deal? Does he have to cover the blood himself? The answer is no. The blood needs to be covered. So let's say he was slaughtering outside on the beach, and all of a sudden a wind came and sand blew and covered all the blood. That would work. And if it became uncovered, then he'd have to cover it again, okay? Similarly, with a sukkah that is already standing and made, if one cannot add anything new, one doesn't recite a blessing when making it. But if one renews something in it, the appropriate blessing applies. So what he's saying as well is, if you do the action, even if the action had been done already, as long as the action is part of the mitzvah, you make a bracha. So in other words, when it comes to covering the blood, sometimes you make a bracha, sometimes you don't. If the candle has already been lit, you're right. You don't make a bracha and you don't extinguish it. But if you're doing the lighting, then you make a bracha. And that's totally legitimate. And then he says, furthermore, our women have a custom to extinguish and relight it. People actually do relight it so that they can make a bracha. And I saw this with my own eyes, right? I observed this and asked them, and they said, this is what we do. And here's my favorite part of the whole thing. And if they are not prophets, they are the daughters of prophets. This is a line that actually gets used in the Talmud. And it's a way of saying that if people who are Torah observant do something, then we believe that that is then that is the correct practice. This was a big theme of Rabbeinu Tam. He looked at people's practices and he read texts to justify their practice. So I made sure women are doing this. That means it's right. Okay, that's my final argument. And the language that he used, if they're not prophets, they're daughters of prophets, the male, or the way he actually changed it to being in the feminine. Usually it said as an neviim heim b'nei neviim heim. If they themselves are not prophets, they're the sons or the children of prophets. He actually went and made it in the feminine. Can't see it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, so he's saying, trust the women. This is what the women do. That means this is the correct practice. You're wrong. Maybe you just didn't observe properly, but this is the practice as we do it. And in fact, this is our practice. I wanted to make two more points here, which is that we have so ritualized this that the Shabbos candles we light are not there for lighting up the home, right? Think about this. In your dining room, you have these lovely Shabbos candles, and then you have the electric lights. And what's lighting the room, right? If the candles weren't there, your room would be lit. So we've really turned it into a complete ritual because we're not relying on those Shabbos candles to light the room. And the second thing I just want to say, I always say this when I teach this, is that your electric lights count as your Shabbos candles. And if you're going out Friday night, you do not have to leave lit candles. What you can do is you can flick on your dining room light and then make the bracha, and then you don't have to worry about fire safety, which is something that I do. Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you so much.
interesting.
Yeah, go ahead, Judy. You're on mute.
Thank you.
You hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, why does it say B'nai Nevi'im Hain? Why doesn't it say Benot?
You're right. They didn't go the whole way. Let's read it as children. You're
Okay.
right.
Okay, sorry.
No
After-
worries. Lance.
Doesn't the Talmud itself say that everything you said here is wrong?
What?
Tell me what you mean.
The oven of Aknai.
The what?
The oven of Aknai.
So
Oh, well,
why
that
would that mean
story.
that I'm wrong?
It means that the majority of the rabbis, in fact, what the rabbis say is wrong when God says the opposite.
So first of all,
So-
the oven of Achnai works the other way. God actually concedes. God says, if the majority of rabbis overrule me. But I think the idea here is first of all, we don't have a majority on one side or the other. And second of all, things change once we're done with the Talmud. So within the what are called the Rishonim, the medieval commentators afterwards, we have lots of debates and we have lots of different practices. Within the Talmud itself, what the rabbis overruled Rabbi Yishmael on was simply whether you could use tar, okay, as a fuel source. And that's true, you can. The discussion afterwards, in some ways, it becomes a separate discussion. Is there an obligation to light candles versus not an obligation? Becomes separated from what exactly you're using. And what I was trying to show here is that the practice continues to develop up to the point in the Middle Ages where we have a debate about whether, what level of mitzvah is this? Is this a mitzvah or not? And then universally, we accept the fact that it is a mitzvah and we all say the bracha. So what you're seeing here is kind of an evolution, and that's what I wanted to show you. That makes sense?
Rabbanit, may I just suggest one little thing?
Sure.
Haven't you not read to the end of the oven of Aknai? What is the end, the final story in the oven of Aknai?
Yes, when what's his face, Rabbi Eliezer is put into he's excommunicated and then he dies.
Kairim.
Right.
Yeah.
Who excommunicates him?
The rabbis excommunicate him.
What specific rabbi?
Well, Rabbi Akiva is the one. Rabbi Akiva,
No,
right?
it's Rabbi
Who is it?
Gamliel, isn't it?
Okay.
And what happens to Rabbi Gamliel at the end of the story?
Okay. So fine. So
God
why?
kills him. God kills him
Okay.
because Rabbi Gamliel says excommunicating that rabbi was wrong and God's angry with me.
Right.
So then Ima Shalom tries to protect her brother.
Right.
And she fails.
Right. Correct.
And so God kills her brother.
Right.
So
that does not prove that he won the argument. And it also means that the problem might have been the excommunication. It's more, look, the principle is throughout the Talmud that the majority wins. Rabbi Eliezer is overruled many, many, many times. He is generally overruled. His combatant is Rabbi Yoshua, and in a debate between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yoshua is overwhelmingly the winner. The Rabbi Akiva story, which is interesting, is Rabbi Akiva was a student of both of them. But the point is that is not, while it is true, right, that that there's very serious, I mean, you can feel the pain of Rabbi Eliezer in the story, and it is true that it's a tragic story, but that does not take back the point, which is that he still lost the argument. And
Well, what about, wait, time out. What about the story of Rabbi Rahumi?
Okay, so hold on. I don't want to keep people.
Well, I think tangentially, and people have a tough time with me because of that. In other words, I move from one thing to another horizontally, and most people think vertically. So I'm suggesting that the story of Rabbi Rahumi makes it clear that God is against the Torah student, God is against the rabbis, and God is in favor of anyone who puts family over Torah. That's the story of Rabbi Rahumi. And if you think
No,
of
you know,
what happens
that's
to
a
Rabbi
different
Akiva?
story.
What?
That's a different story. That's a different
It's
issue.
a different story. But the theme is the same from my perspective. I totally
Why
agree
is this about family? Because of
because you remember the
Shalom?
story, Rabbi Rahumi, he is working in a yeshiva, several days travel from his home. He
Right.
goes to his home once a year.
Yeah. I know.
Yom Kippur.
Right. I'm aware of the story. I'm just not
Okay.
sure how
Well,
it's
what happens
connected
to him?
here.
What happens to Rabbi Rahumi? God kills him.
Right.
And
Because he
his
wasn't.
wife sheds one tear.
Right.
But she doesn't know what's happening.
Right. So
Well,
that's about, right.
She's like the mother of Sisera. She doesn't know what's happening. She doesn't have a clue. But it's clear to the reader
Yes.
that's what's happening. Now the question is is God the author? And if God's the author, what is God's interpretation? And human beings don't
If
know that.
God's the author of
So,
the Talmud, God's not the author of the Talmud.
no,
No one believes that. No, God's the author
I
of the
do.
Torah.
I believe
Oh,
that.
you do? Okay. Well, you are in the extreme minority.
I am. That's
So,
exactly where I am. I'm in the
okay.
extreme minority.
Okay. I got you. Okay.
But the question is, wait, one final point, and that is, you're talking about lighting the Shabbos candle, right?
Mm-hmm.
What if you accept the Torah, but you do not light the Shabbos candle? In fact, you don't have any kindling or burning whatsoever on Shabbos. Are you still Jewish?
Of course.
Jewish.
Of course.
So, in other words, the Karaites are Jewish.
They're not rabbinic Jews, yes.
They're not rabbinic, but they're Jewish.
If they come
To
from
themselves,
Jewish
they're
parentage, they're
And-
Jewish.
And if a Karaite person is in Egypt today, that Karaite person is the victim of anti-Semitism, even though for many people, Karaites are not Jews. See what I'm saying?
Okay.
What I'm trying to get at is that there are Jews in the world that rabbinic Jews do not accept as Jews.
I hear you, Lance. I hear you. All right. I appreciate your comments. I got to go back to my guys here in the yeshiva. This was really a pleasure.
Thank you.
I'd like to come again.
Thanks for your
Maybe we should do
comments.
another class.
Okay, take care. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.